Welcome to Meet the COO with Mel Heckman today. It's our new career-oriented interview format by the Operations Council. My name is Neil Brown, COO of the Operations Council, and before I introduce our COO panelists today, allow me to cover some brief housekeeping items. First, although we will not have live Q&A today, feel free to use the GoToWebinar control panel to ask a question to our panelists or the Operations Council, and we will respond post-webcast. Second, a video recording of today's interview will be available to all attendees via email link that you'll receive in the next 24 hours. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our COO panelist, Mel Heckman, a career COO and CIO on both the client side and in consulting roles, including Ernst & Young and American Outdoor Brands. Mel earned an MBA from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business and a Bachelor of Science, Operations Management and Information Systems from Northern Illinois University, also my alma mater. He is a CPIM certified with the American Production and Inventory Control Society, APICS. Mel, welcome and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And let's go on to our video cameras and we'll get to the questions. Okay, so great, Mel. Our new format, as mentioned, is intended to go into a number of career-related questions, a so-called lightning round of Q&A.
Okay.
And with that, my first question is, what inspired you to pursue a career in operations?
I was lucky in that when I started school, as you alluded to, NIU, I was in operations management and information systems. So I kind of got a taste of like those basic, operational concepts. And when we talk about that, we're talking like MRP and, distribution and manufacturing, all those little concepts. And then I went to work for a company called Ernst & Young, a big consulting firm. And I asked them if they would help pay for my APICS certification. And it was just kind of like, I didn't really know what APICS was, right? I was just kind of like this young kid coming out of school, 4 years educated, but didn't know squat. And I asked if they could help me fund getting paid. I got those, so they ordered the books, I did the self-training, and I got the certification. And it's funny how like a little bit of preparation and opportunities start coming together. What I found myself doing is just by accident, getting into more organizations that were either manufacturing or distribution or a lot of 3PLs. And so it's like everything kind of came together that I found myself very heavily in operations-based roles in positions over the years.
Okay, neat. Go ahead and tell us about some of the most significant keys to your success.
It's the one thing that I found about operations, and I've had the privilege of kind of seeing wearing a couple of different hats in terms of being, strictly focused on the operations or strictly focused on the CIO, or in many cases doing a little bit of both. What I found has been key to me being successful is that constant learning. So, when I first started out, I call me nerdy or whatever, but I would actually go home at the end of the day, going to a client or whatever, and I would lay out a series of trainings for myself, whether it be reading a book about Oracle, or deep diving a little bit more into operations, or learning a little bit more about MRP or manufacturing, and literally laid out a study guide for myself every night, where I would do, back in the day when the internet wasn't this popular, I would do a set of chapters. Like I'm going to do 3 chapters of XYZ every night, and I laid out a plan. And it's funny how that commitment, and it took a lot, right? Like as you work all day and you're a young 24, 25-year-old kid, and there's better things to do in your own mind. how much that prepared for me for the things that I saw. I mean, I don't think there was a single day that didn't go by where something I had read the previous night didn't somehow make its way into the next day. And so I attribute this unbelievable quest for knowledge to be a huge part of the success that I've seen in the preparation I've had to deal with the challenges of operations roles over the years.
A lifetime student, so to speak.
Yes, for sure.
Neat. I've seen that before.
Yeah.
As a key to success. Tell us about some of the roles and responsibilities of a COO and how maybe these roles have changed over time.
Traditionally, when you think of like the roles of a CIO, you primarily think of the person who's in charge of getting stuff out the door, right? Like, or building efficiencies, and or in the manufacturing environments that I've been part of, building a more efficient operation or streamlined manufacturing process, or dealing with the inefficiencies within that. And I think at its core, that is fundamentally what an operations officer does. But the challenge is that an operations officer has to deal with a lot more. So like an operation officer just can't make a more efficient mousetrap, or a more efficient production line, or a more efficient pick, pack, ship operation, and just to get the product out the door. It's really understanding everything that goes, it's in front of the process, the sales process, the allocation process, the forecasting process, and then all the stuff on the back end of the invoicing, the credit, receiving payments, and all the other stuff. So it's one of these roles that kind of touches everything. And what I've seen change a lot is that the lines between the CIO and the COO is really blurring tremendously. There's still this notion that there's an operational officer who's very focused on the operations, and then there's a CIO who's very focused on the technology. But really, to be successful as a COO, you really need to be a highly technical person. I don't mean like a code junkie. I'm talking like you have to understand the art of the possible and how to apply it in a very practical way. Like, you can't just know that you can integrate two systems. You have to understand fundamentally what it means to integrate those systems and what are the risks of those integrations. And sometimes that means you have to understand APIs. You have to understand, cloud-based systems, and you have to understand, security and cybersecurity risks and all that stuff. So, and I can continue to see this where the CIO and the COO are in either a merged role in an organization, or really work hand in hand, almost sometimes not even knowing where one stops and one ends, because they're so tied together in finding solutions for organizations.
And do you think, Mel, parallel to add on to that question, that roles and responsibilities are different for the industry you're in, for the size company you're in, that kind of thing?
I haven't seen that. I mean, just to be fair, most of the industries I've been in is in construction, or in a retail environment, or distribution environments, or manufacturing environments. So I haven't spent a lot of time in, say, like, organizations that create software, or organizations that are in healthcare. But the challenges are, I think it's very similar. Like, it's still that notion of building efficiencies, looking for ways to improve processes, but using technology to get there. But not just making silly applications of technology. It's really understanding the risks and rewards of technology, and knowing when to use technology to solve problems, when to use process to solve problems, when to use people to solve problems, or a combination thereof.
Right. And I've seen that at times IT can report to the CEO, depending, again, it might be company size or something, or HR could report to the COO. So it's kind of all over the place, like you say, that
Yeah,
there
yeah,
are different roles but now with this tsunami of digital transformation and now AI technologies, who's going to manage that? That's systems. And so, like you say, that blurring of COO and CIO might be picking up steam with these new technologies.
yeah. And I'll say, like, just in my roles as a CIO or my roles as a COO, I've reported all over the place. Like, so I've reported directly to say the chief information officer, or I'm sorry, not the CEO. I meant to report directly to the CEO, or sometimes, a lot of times, reported to the CFO. But there doesn't seem to be a real, there's this concept of a seat at the table, right, folks? So traditionally, you would like to see the COO position report directly to the CEO. And I think in the vast majority of times, that's the case. And it's probably going to you'll start seeing more of that trend where the COO position is truly that seat at the table. And it's the same concept with CIO as well.
Yeah, great. All right, well, let's move on to another question here. Share something interesting about your operations career that you didn't expect or surprised you.
Well, so this is kind of a funny. So as I started getting more involved with especially 3PL organizations in distribution operations and manufacturing operations, I think what surprised me at first, and this is the Wayback Machine, right, is that the number of organizations that really lived and died in Excel. So, like you see these, you go on a website of a 3PL, for example, and they say, oh, we have proliferation of technology and we can use technology to make you more efficient. You go in the back room, and what is there? All they're doing is they're living and dying off of Excel. And so that was surprising to me, in that there was just this lack of imagination in terms of how you can make more efficient use of technologies and to solve problems. Like, Excel is one way to solve it, but many times it's the heavy lift way to solve it, right? It's a massaging the data and moving data between disparate systems and trying to use VLOOKUP to solve problems. And there's more elegant solutions. So I think that surprised me, and served as an opportunity for me, who thinks more digital transformational, right? Like, how do you use digital transformation? I think the other thing that really surprised me, and I did allude to this, is just the amount of knowledge that a COO needs to have to be successful, right? So, you really have to understand the language of finance, as an example. Like, you really have to understand costing and cost accounting and managerial accounting, and really understand the impact of everything that you do and the solutions that you bring, how it ultimately affects the bottom line. And conversely, everything that you do, how it affects the front line, including the sales folks, the sales teams, and in other aspects of the operation. So it's one of these roles that are kind of tricky, in that you really kind of need to be a jack of all trades. Really need to be a jack of all trades. And I think that was eye-opening for me, certainly early in my career, and it just got reinforced over time that there's really no book or no piece of knowledge that you gain in your either through book smart or through experience that doesn't somehow touch what you bring to an organization.
Neat. And I agree. We've been developing the Operations Council for a couple of years now, and there really is a dearth of information out there.
Yeah.
It's overlooked. So there's no roadmap, and that's why we're here and trying to support that. All right, the question that all would-be, wannabe COOs want to hear from you is, what advice would you give others that seek an operations or COO career?
You know, the biggest thing is to start out, and you have to be hungry for it, right? It is, I would not say an operations career is easy. I would not say that it's like, you know, an easy barrier, has a low barrier to entry. You know, really, if you start, when you start in operations, you'll typically start on the, you know, in areas like truly almost on the floor, like, you know, working a manufacturing line or building efficiencies there, or you know, running the operations of a warehouse, et cetera. And that's where you traditionally find yourself learning. But in order to take those next levels or move up in the area, really requires you to really start getting into those challenges and really start understanding it at a deeper level. So again, it's this notion of staying hungry and constantly learning, which is absolutely critical. I think the other really important thing that I try to share with people is not to be biased by your own experiences, right? And I battle this myself, right? So when you've been in operations for 30 years, or you've worked at dozens of companies, and you've seen dozens of ways of using people, process, and technology to solve complex problems, it's easy to say, well, I've done it that way before, so just do it this way. And I think what somebody in operations needs to understand, especially going forward, is that you need to take your immediate bias or your initial solution. Like, somebody comes to you with a problem, manufacturing line, we don't have enough data, we need better analytics to drive a solution. You know, in your past, you might say, well, I have years burst, right? Why don't we just upload this to Power BI and you can pivot it out and da, 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 da. Like, because you have done it before and it works. And my recommendation to somebody is to say, okay, take that, put it in a box and put it aside, and then really attack the problem top up, bottom up and top down. Like, so like, look at the details and then weigh in some, weigh in the opinions and knowledge of people around you, bring that together, and then later compare it to your bias. And I think ultimately, I found that you have a better result from that. And it's not easy to do, because like when you're in operations, and like I said, you're wearing a lot of hats, right? And so a lot of times you don't have time to sit there and be indecisive, right? You know, sometimes you just need to make a decision. And so find balance. Obviously, when you're taking your initial bias and putting it aside, you gotta find balance. You can't just put everything aside, because you'll just have like a shelf full of like unsolved problems. But take an open-minded approach, and I think it makes sense. The other thing, and this is kind of like, I'm trying to think how to say this, but the other thing I think helps is a willingness to take some risk, right? I think in operations, you see it all the time, especially when you've been in a while, the folks that are like paralyzed by analysis. Well, I have to make sure that we have this, and let's go double check with Johnny in sales to make sure that we're good for him, and let's go talk to the finance and the controller and make sure we're good there, and then we got to talk to the operations guy, the guy on the floor, to make sure we don't mess up there. That's all well said and done, but no different than trying to protect putting your biases to the side for a second. You eventually just need to just go with your gut as well, and just be willing to take a risk and be comfortable that whatever direction you take, hopefully you're mostly right? And if you're mostly right, you're gonna at least be directionally moving in the right place. Or even if you're a little bit wrong, if you're mostly right, you can pivot and change. So I said a lot there, and it's just a balance of weighing a lot of different risks, and then be able to make decisions, and then balancing in your biases and coaching and other experiences. Hopefully that was a lot. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does. And you said some other things like being a career student and all that, which I think is just good advice for being an executive and being in business, period. It's intuitive. So great stuff, Mel. Thank you for all your interesting ideas and insights, and great success to you and to our attendees in 23 and beyond. And we look forward to ongoing collaboration.
Yeah, thank you. And I've enjoyed my collaboration with the Operations Council, and look forward to continuing that relationship going forward. It's a gateway to encourage that learning that we've talked about.
All right. Thanks, Mel. Have a
Thank
good one.
you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.